Hello and welcome to Market Psychology 101, where we look for value in the markets when there's fear and are cautious when there's greed. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the Bitcoin rainbow chart, going through different Bitcoin and crypto macro indicators, seeing where we are in this cycle. When might we be able to expect an alt season? So let's get into it. And starting off with fear and greed, crypto back up into extreme greed, which makes sense because there was this big movement recently. When we zoom in on the smaller time frames, you can see that Bitcoin getting down to a low of 93K just a few days ago, and now getting back above 100K. So in the span of, we'll measure this out, in the span of 5 days or so, Bitcoin has moved up 10%. So, pretty solid move right there for Bitcoin. And so, when we take a look at the fear and greed index, what do we see? We were slowly trending down, making lower highs, lower lows. We are still technically doing that. So, do be mindful of this. Something to consider, one of two scenarios to have in the back of your mind is when we've seen these spikes, then you can expect some sideways or even downwards price action for the next few months to half a year. But when greed stays higher for longer, that's when we have seen alt season happen last cycle, or even further highs from the recent highs that Bitcoin has made. So if we see greed staying up here higher for longer for a few months, this started in early November, and here we are in early January. So that's been a couple months already. If we see this continuing for another month, then maybe we are going to be seeing Bitcoin get up to a level around 120K or so. Going into just a macro perspective, something to keep in the back of your mind is before we get alt season, which lasts about a month near the very top, this is when alt season happened over the course of 4 weeks in 2021. Last cycle, it happened over the course of about 4 to 6 weeks. On the way up, you will get a half dozen or so 30% corrections, 40% corrections, 20% corrections. So before we get alt season, if that is something you believe in, the cyclical nature of Bitcoin, then those can present decent dip buying opportunities. Of course, as we wait for alt season, we are waiting for Bitcoin dominance to go down. And what Bitcoin dominance is, for any new viewers, is the overall percent of money that's in crypto that is in Bitcoin. So recently it's been between 55 and 60% of crypto money has been in Bitcoin. When that money starts to rotate into large caps, small caps, that's when we've seen alt season. And a way to measure that, you can go to blockchaincenter.net. Shout out, not sponsored. When you click the yearly tab, you can see where we are in the macro alt season index. And as we zoom out, you can see we have not had a big alt year spike like we had last cycle or the cycle before it. And so we have been trending, making higher highs, higher lows just recently. So maybe there are still some good deals out there if you are to pick the right altcoins. And going over to the rainbow chart, that's why many of you are here. You want to hear about the cyclical nature of Bitcoin. When you take a look at this, the first place your mind's probably going to go is, well, we're right in the middle. We're at even value. We're not at deep value or discounted prices, and we're not at high prices either. What I would say to argue against that is you will notice each halving goes up a color zone. And so you can see here, second color zone, third, fourth halving, got into the fourth color zone. And each of the recent peaks have gone down a zone as well. So this was above the highest zone right here. In 2017, we got into the dark red. In the last cycle, it was in the middle and lower portion. So there is decreased volatility. This is the rainbow chart is mapping logarithmic regression. So logarithmic, that's log scale, factors of 10. And we have regression. So we have diminished returns over time, decreased volatility. So we're not really in median value. If you believe that somewhere in these orange bands will be the next top, which is part of my thesis. Somewhere around that 125 to 160K value. That's my best guess. And I'm not here to make predictions either. I'm here to try to answer the essential question: is now a good time to buy or sell? That is the point of these videos, not to tell you what to do or predict. There's a ton of different ways we can look for predictions based off patterns. I don't think that's smart though. What I think is smart is having a strategy that works regardless of where the market is. So if we get in these orange zones, it's typically a very risky time to buy. For any new retail out there, that is a better time to sell, take profits. Here has been a better time to buy, obviously, but I know many people coming here to watch for the first time, you may be disheartened to hear that, but that's the reality. I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm just going to give you the facts. So if Bitcoin starts moving up into these orange zones, for those of us who have been buying in these green and blue colored zones, we're going to be looking at possibly taking some profits. And let's say there is a top somewhere around early April. Those orange bands, you can see 122K to 156K, if not a little bit higher. If you believe in the 4-year cycle, and that is a phenomena you see here, the tops have been in December of 2013, 4 years later, December 2017, 4 years later, the very top of Bitcoin, November 21, even though alt season was here, we had that double top, there was money printing, stimulus cash coming out, and so that's why markets pumped earlier last time. Alt season did have it happen here in the earlier part of 2021. So there's been a couple different camps out there that maybe alt season's going to come earlier around April, and Bitcoin might only get to the 120 to 160K range. Or there's been another camp, maybe it's another 4-year cycle and it pops up December of this year, 2025, or maybe January of next year. I will show you base cases that I could argue for both, but then let you decide. So something I look for personally is when I'm looking at taking profits, I'm taking a look for the price of Bitcoin to be in these orange zones in that 120 to 160K area. I'm also looking for Bitcoin dominance to start falling. And so again, Bitcoin dominance, it's the percent of money that is in Bitcoin that is in all of crypto. So all the crypto money right now we have, we'll keep that on actually. We have 57.67% of that money's in Bitcoin. When this rolls over to the low 40 percentile, you can see we're on the weekly chart right here. So if you click the 5-year and 1-week intervals, you can see this lasted about a month and a half. And when that dominance rotated, that money rotated into altcoins, that's when people were getting rich really quick. So many altcoins have already gone up 5x, 10x, if not more. So do temper your expectations. It's very hard, increasingly harder to find better value altcoins the later we get. So going back to 2017, you can see the same thing. Alt season ended around this first week of January, and this lasted about 4 weeks. Again, getting to the low 40 percentile. So I would guess and wager that we'd be expecting the same. There's a couple different trend lines here. If you draw them from the very bottoms, there's one trend line that would have dominance getting to 42%. And we also have this horizontal trend line where you could just argue maybe the high 30s, low 40 percentile as well. So that is another way to look at, are we having alt season? This is also led up to the peaks as well. So you see here, May 10th of 2021, you can see the dates at the bottom. January of 2018, let's go back to the rainbow chart, and you can see January 2018, that's about the very peak. As soon as it started to almost roll over, May, you can see here, that's before there was a 50% correction in crypto. Now here was alt season. Yes, it made another top. Yes, there were some alts that went up higher at this time, but do keep in mind, this was considered alt season. That's when dominance rotated. So those are a couple indicators I look for to say, is that a good time to withdraw money, as well as looking in these orange zones. let's take a look at the current price action of Bitcoin. So right now, you can see we have this trend line from the double top of 2021, and the weekly candle is right on there. I'm using Fibonacci candles. It makes the charts, you can see more of a trend in these charts. And when the Fibonacci candles turn green, typically you see at least two or more green candles happen in a row. Again, it's a trend, but I also have on an indicator for this is a buy sell signal indicator. You have the 10 and 20 moving average crossover with Fibonacci signals. And so this green dot, that's a buy signal. And when we're using Fibonacci, this would lead us to believe that we would see at least a couple green weeks. Now, when are times we don't see more than a couple weeks green? That is when we're going sideways or accumulating. But when we're in an uptrend, you see many green weeks in a row. So we are getting a buy signal on the weekly. That's a good macro signal for Bitcoin. Going over to Bitcoin dominance, we are in the second week of a sell signal. So even though Bitcoin dominance has gone up from the very dip in recent times, maybe this can still go further. Let's take a look at Ethereum. Ethereum now getting a weekly buy signal. So that is a good thing. And we also want to see Ethereum get above. Let's zoom way out here. Let's put our Fibonacci retracement on log scale. We are taking a look at the fib from the high to the low macro wise, and you can see that Ethereum has not been able to really get past this wedge. It got above it a little bit, but 3 times it's been rejected by this 888 fib. So that tends to be a fib that stands in the way between the 786 and former all-time high. If Ethereum can get out of this wedge, and when I'm looking for something to break out, I'm looking for candle bodies to be completely closing above those trend lines or those fib lines. If it's just the candle bodies on it or it's just a wick, we're still in FACO territory. So you can see candle body coming up to that trend line, only a wick, could still be a FACO. But if Ethereum starts to close above this trend line, that would be new. It didn't happen recently in early December. And if it can start closing above 4,100, I would say that'd be very bullish for Ethereum. And speaking of Ethereum, one of the arguments more for a 4-year cycle is when you take a look at Ethereum Bitcoin. Last cycle, when Ethereum Bitcoin pairing bottomed here in September 2019, that's when Bitcoin dominance topped. So Ethereum Bitcoin, I call it the shadow of Bitcoin dominance. And you can see until that time we had alt season. And if you're paying attention when that was in early May. And so right here, early May, you can see that was 600 days and a 300% move up. But if this was the peak for Bitcoin dominance and the bottom for Ethereum Bitcoin, we don't have to go up 300%. You can see this trend line going from the various peaks. Yes, there is this one peak, but again, it's just a wick. So when we line up these peaks, it does line up back here in 2017. So we're going to just take that for what it's worth. We don't have to see Ethereum Bitcoin move up 300%. Okay, so you can see to get to that trend line, that 0.5 trend line, that means, by the way, 0.5 would be Ethereum. If it got to this level, Ethereum Bitcoin, that Ethereum's market cap would be half that of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, if it got to 155K, I've already mathed this out, it would have around a 3 trillion market cap. What would that mean for Ethereum? A $1.5 trillion market cap. I'll show you about where that would be on the Ethereum chart here. But you can see if Ethereum only has to move up 150%, maybe instead of 600 days to get there, which would be in the middle of next year, what if we just took around half that? If we took around 300 days, that would put us in September. You can see the dates at the bottom, by the way. So 300 days would put us in September. Put that number or that date, September, in the back of your mind. I'll come back to that in a second. But maybe it takes a little bit longer. Maybe we get a 4-year cycle. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle, 400 days. So the Ethereum Bitcoin pairing, I think, tends to lead us to believe that maybe we are still in a 4-year cycle environment. Now, is that to say that it can't move up in the next 130 days? Maybe. Anything's possible. But for that to happen, Ethereum would have to start moving strongly against Bitcoin very, very fast, and the time's closing for that. Let's answer that question. If Bitcoin was at about a 3 trillion market cap, or 2.5 to 3 trillion, let's just say 125 to 155K, we're going to take our fib off log and we're going to take a look at some of these price targets here. Let's clean this up a little bit. So right now you can see Ethereum is at around 450 billion market cap at this price of 3,700. I'm going to do some rounded math. It's not going to be perfect, but let's say ETH is at 4,000. I'd say it's safe to assume that Ethereum's market cap would be around 500 billion market cap. I know it's not going to be exact, but it's going to be close. Well, if Ethereum was at 4,000, what's 4,000 times 3? That would be 12,000. Is there anything near 12,000? Yes, we have the 2618 fib at 11,300. And so that could be a scenario where we see Ethereum worth around, give or take, $1 to $1.5 trillion. I know it seems crazy. I know it seems unlikely Ethereum could get to the 10K to 11K area at the 2618 fib. But let me remind you, last cycle, I remember when it seemed crazy. Let's find this 2021 peak. I remember when Bitcoin dominance was peaking and Ethereum Bitcoin was bottoming. Take a look to the right where Ethereum's price was. It was around 200 bucks, give or take, even a little less, sometimes a little more. Let's just say 200 bucks. Nice round number. Well, we know Ethereum got up almost to 5K. So $200 to 5K, that is an unbelievable amount of movement. That is a 2,600% move, 2,586%. So is it really that impossible to believe that Ethereum could do another strong move if we were to see an alt season like that? just going from recent times, can Ethereum just do a 360% move? Again, this is what the logarithmic regression shows. This is what the diminished returns show. We're not going to get the same percent of the same strength of percent of movement, but we're still going to have strong areas for gain. So I do see, even though it sounds unbelievable to say, being someone who was here in 2017, in here in 2021, in here, I still believe that Ethereum could hit 10 or 11K. All right, that's the 4-year cycle narrative. Remember what we were talking about with that 300-day date that would be sometime around September? Well, let's take a look at this number right here. I calculated this out from every halving to the next peak. The average it is taken from the prior cycles. If you add all those numbers together and divide them, so you go all the amount of time it takes in each cycle to get from the halving, I put that in the white line here. You can see April at the bottom, April 24. Let's cross-check that. The halving right in here, you'd see April in 2024. So I took the 3 last cycles and I said, how many days from the halving to the peak? Now, you might say this was the peak or this was the peak. I still went by the true peak, okay? If you take those days, add them up, divide them by 3, because there's been 3 different cycles. Sorry about my cat's automatic feeder going off in the background. That puts us at 484 days average from the halving to the next peak, which is, you see that date at the bottom, in August, close to September of 2025. So I'm not trying to use this data and say, I predict that the top will be August, September of this year. That's not what I'm trying to do. That is one scenario to have in the back of your mind. Again, strategy is more important than predictions. If this scenario happens, cool. But if Bitcoin dominance gets to low 40%, if the rainbow chart gets into the orange zone and is worth around 125K, If my altcoins that I am holding on to, such as Chainlink and others, are hitting their price targets, I am going to withdraw. I don't need to wait for this exact situation to happen. I have my price targets picked out and I have my scenarios picked out to go along with that. Now, you might have a different mindset where you withdraw a certain percent of profits and then you let the rest ride to see if it goes higher. Your plan is your own. I'm just sharing with you some things I am looking at. Let's take a look at just a couple more indicators that I think fits with what we are talking about here. And one we are going to take a look at, we've been looking at this more recently, is the logarithmic regression on the weekly. It's like taking the rainbow chart but adding it to our trading view chart. So you can see the last couple of cycles, not the 2013 cycle, that we have seen this upward trend. There's no denying that. You see it get up to this red logarithmic regression band. Now in 2017, it topped around the middle, as you all know, around 17 to 20K. In 2021, it topped 3/4 of the way up around 65K, and then near the halfway mark, even though the top was around 69K. Nice. And so where are those levels this time? Well, halfway up, let's say you believe in a March top, March or April. That puts Bitcoin at around 130K, and most of the way up, if we're just move this over a little bit, as high as 165K. Cool, remember that. Let's go out, let's draw a line here, and I will try to draw this on as true of an angle as I can. You can see looking to the right, 145K near the top or 3/4 of the way up, 180K. Cool. Well, let's zoom out here and draw a fib. So we are going to, I hope you see what we're doing here. We have the logarithmic regression. We're matching up the price targets here with what we have seen in the Bitcoin rainbow chart in the orange bands. Again, 120 to 160K in those orange bands. You know what we're doing? You see the diminished returns. You see the halving prices going up a color zone each time. You see the peaks going down a color zone each time. So conservatively speaking, if we only see Bitcoin get into the orange zone, we're looking around that 150K number, give or take. Well, let's take our fib and let's draw it from the prior macro high to low. And we are going to clean this up a little bit, make sure we can see what the heck we're talking about. And when we're taking a look at price targets, have your fib unchecked on log. Okay. When we're taking a look at discounted prices in between, you have it on log. Price targets, you take it off log. Where is 155K? Well, you see it right here. That is the 2618. Let's actually move that over a little bit. Try to line that up pretty well. Each little bit you change it, the number is going to change just a tiny bit. So again, plus or minus 1,000 for error. 2618 is at around 155K. That lines up in the orange bands. That also lines up in this logarithmic regression band. So there's a lot to say or indicate that this would be a range to look for a Bitcoin top. And again, a Bitcoin top at around 150K would be at around 3 trillion. And you don't have to take my word for it. If Bitcoin's 100K and it's worth 2 trillion, well, what's Bitcoin at 50K? 1 trillion. Okay. You add the 1 to the 2, then we're at 3 trillion for 50K plus 100K, 150K. 3 trillion's around that price. What's interesting to me about that 3 trillion market cap is 3 trillion is close to the market caps of the top stocks in the world. Let's take off this log regression so it's not messing everything up. So Apple, 3.7 trillion market cap. You can see that. Microsoft, 3.2 trillion market cap. Nvidia, 3.66 trillion. So it almost makes sense to me that if Bitcoin got to that 150K number, that it would be just underneath these top 3 stocks in the world. I'm hard pressed to believe that Bitcoin is going to be worth more than Microsoft, Nvidia or Apple. That's just me. If you feel differently, that is absolutely fine. Something else I want you to know is that let's draw our fibs again. Let's draw our fib, and it's good to do this more than once so we can replicate. If you're coming up with different answers when you're doing this over and over, you're doing it wrong. Well, let's take a look at what Bitcoin has done. Again, we have Fibonacci candles on. These candles show us trends. Okay, these are regular candles. It's more messy. When we see the candles with a trend, it cleans things up. It also shows us that when Bitcoin was making technically a new high in March, did any of the candles close above that former all-time high? No, some got right up to it, but we only had wicks above it. And so it slowly died and faded down into this channel. When Bitcoin was breaking out of that channel with candle bodies closing not just above the channel, but that former all-time high, that gray line at 69K, you'll remember 69K was the top from 2021. You don't have to just trust me, bro. You can see that right here. That's why the fib works that way. You can see Bitcoin moved up and it got to the next fib. The next fib, this is why we draw fibs. And if you're wondering, what's the big deal about this fib retracement? This fib retracement tool is based off the golden standard scale that is everywhere in the world and in the universe. You can look into it yourself, but when you take a look at how rivers branch off into streams or blood vessels branch off into capillaries, the golden ratio that's out there in our world, that's basically what the Fibonacci scale is playing off of. So you see this 1618 fib at 102K. Let's turn this on auto so we're not stretched out. What happened when Bitcoin got up to this level? Well, it stalled out a little bit. You can see, yes, it was having weekly closes above or wicks above, but it never was candle body closing. Now, it is riding that double top trend line. And so if we see Bitcoin hold on to this buy signal and start to get above this 1618 fib, I'm talking candle bodies closing above, then I would guess that we could see Bitcoin start moving up into those 120 to 150K range. When that's going to happen, I don't know, but that would be something to watch for. And if that happens soon, could that happen by March? Sure. There's a number of scenarios. Could there be a mini alt season in March, a big sell-off, and then another alt season later in the year, somewhat like we had last cycle, a double peak? Sure. I don't know if we're going to get a double peak or a single peak. But again, what I'm saying is this. My strategy in the altcoins and the Bitcoin mining stocks that I have, subscribe if you want to hear about Bitcoin mining stocks, which I like because we can see their balance sheet and which ones have positive asset to liability ratios, which one have negative asset to liability ratios. But that is why I like Bitcoin miners. So I'm taking a look at when are any of these going to hit their price targets that I am looking for, my price targets, not financial advice for yours. So whenever that happens, I am flexible to wait for either scenario, whether it's March, later this year, even at the start of next year. Again, I don't care when it happens. Have a strategy that is better than either prediction. Don't be tied into thinking as a bull, as a bear. Here at Market Psychology 101, we are using emotion as an indicator, not always a decision maker. Because oftentimes if we make decisions based off our emotions, in the line of work I do that gets a lot of people in trouble, ruins relationships, gets people going to jail, getting addicted to drugs, all sorts of bad stuff. It's just something I deal with. And that's the type of mindset I have when I look at stocks and crypto. Where is fear? Where is greed? What is that telling us? And am I staying within the framework of my plan? I have my own strategy. I've put out videos on it in the past, and I'm always trying to evolve my strategy. But I have my own strategy that I stick within the framework of, and I'm always trying to make it better. If there's times I lose money, and there have been times, it happens to the best of us, I take a look at what went wrong and how can I adjust my plan so it can adapt and evolve. Let's take a look at Bitcoin on the daily and we'll wrap it up. So Bitcoin on the daily, what do we see here? We can see that the bottom it got to, if we are to just take a look at the dashed line here, the bottom it got to, it never closed underneath this area of about 91K. And it's been going up ever since. So it is at that 1618 line right here. Is it going to close above? It has strong momentum. You can see that the most recent high was at about 108K. And so right now, if we zoom out, if we take this channel and just stretch it out, Bitcoin is also challenging the lower end of this channel. Can it get back into that channel? If so, that might lead into, again, the stronger argument of maybe we see a top in March. Maybe some of the altcoins will start to top in March. Maybe we will see Bitcoin dominance start to move further down. It's creating lower highs. It's creating higher lows. Is this wedge formation getting ready to break out one way or the other? And so that's what happens with these wedge formations, is that when they get really wound up, we usually see a big move happen one way or the other, up or down. But I'll remind you that Bitcoin dominance, the last two cycles, when it breaks down, we can see that that is when alt season happens, and it happens very fast. So here you can see there is a wedge formation back here. Okay, you guys can see the lower highs. I don't have to draw that out for you. And it broke way down. Okay, as well as, was there a wedge formation here? Kind of. Let's say kind of. There were higher lows, and then it broke down underneath that. So that's why we draw trend lines. We're looking for those types of things to break down. Like I showed you, we have the macro sell signal on the weekly. I'll also just add, there's some other indicators I look at. The stochastic RSI, this is on the weekly. This is somewhat concerning, but if we take it out to the monthly, what do we see? At least last cycle, it did have to get oversold twice in order for Bitcoin dominance to truly bottom. That was on the monthly. So it did have that second spike and then bottom. In 2017, it was having bullish divergence already. It was moving up before it eventually bottomed. If we take a look at another RSI, let's take a look at ultimate RSI. What I like on this one, when we take a look at the weekly, you can see that when the orange moving average started to break down, that was sort of the beginning of the end. I'll say the fourth quarter, if you will. And so I believe we have started the fourth quarter, and whether that fourth quarter is going to result in a 4-year cycle, that Q4 of this cycle, again, I'm saying quarter four, not as in the time of year, but how we have 4 years, these 4-year cycles between the tops. I believe we have entered the fourth quarter, and that the top is most likely going to be happening sometime this year. This moving average shows us that. I'm waiting to see. You can see already the ultimate RSI on the weekly is breaking down. It is coming down. So this is the longest it's stayed up here. What is going to happen as it breaks down? How far down is it going to go? We'll wait and see. So that's going to do it for today. Comment below what your thoughts are. And just for fun, are you leaning towards a top being in the earlier part of this year, sometime around March? Are you more of a 4-year cycle person? You're looking at September to December. So are you looking for 4 years from this peak, 4 years from this peak? Again, April or November. Okay. Which side are you leaning towards? And if you're thinking something completely different than that, let me know in the comments below. But again, in my opinion, don't get too attached to any of these. These are just ranges. And every time something a little bit different happens, and our plans, our strategies have to be flexible enough to handle those variables that happen. Because if you're married to the top being in March and it doesn't happen, Bitcoin dominance doesn't fall, your altcoins don't hit their price targets, Well, then what are you going to do? Are you going to possibly sell before we do have alt season? Because there's multiple indicators to show that we haven't, where is it? That we haven't gotten there yet. So, what is your plan? How are you going to stick to that plan, regardless of whatever euphoria or fear is in the market when those things happen? Whether it be Bitcoin maybe coming back down, testing a macro moving average? Are you going to be buying in more? Are you going to be panic selling? Or as it gets up into those orange zones, into the log regression, into that 130 to 150K, are you going to be looking to take profits? Okay, so now's the time to make sure you have your plan thought out. You've been tested twice with the top in March of last year and the most recent top. You've been tested twice. We've seen altcoins go up 2 times. Are you going to be able to take profits when we have alt season, when we have rotation? Do you want to take profits? It's completely up to you. I will just add, people I know who don't pay as much attention to crypto as I do. I'm not saying this to make it sound like I'm better or smarter than them, okay? It's not what I'm saying. But those people were buying in at the top and they've been holding their bags for 4 years. Or they bought in at the top here and they were holding their bags for 4 years until they recently had profits, okay? I've been buying in down here and I'm looking to take profits in the next push or wave up that I hope is coming. So think a little bit different than the retail that's just getting in now. And if you are getting in now, do know it is a very risky, educated gamble time. Some altcoins can go up, but I wouldn't be looking for a 10x, a 20x. If I was getting in now, I'm only conservatively looking for a 3 or 4x and being happy with that at best. So that does it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend and a wonderful Monday. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day.